Welcome, Claire, to the Conscious Creators podcast. This honestly feels like a surreal moment because 2 years ago, when I started the podcast in January, you were actually one of the first people that I had on my list of who I wanted to ask. So it feels like full circle moment, but also I feel like you've been a part of the people that I watch in the online space quite consistently for, I feel like much longer than that if I felt like I wanted to have you on the podcast. So this is just super cool to be able to dive into everything what you're going through, and then be able to share that with more people on in my space. So thanks for being here.
I feel the same. There's just certain people in the online space that I love seeing their content, and yours is always one of those. And yeah, it's fun to be on here. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. Okay. So as a little intro into, I guess, my people in my space, I know lots about you. You're like the queen of breathwork and embodiment, and you just show up in like such a loving way. But I want people in my space to get to know a little bit of your story. I've listened to you on other podcasts and you have shared that. And I honestly just love it because it feels like such a different, from where you started to where you're at now, just seems like a 180, like just so different. So if you can give just a couple-minute intro of where Claire was when she got into this and then where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. So I started out in mindset coaching with this work, honestly, just from my own experience of how much these practices helped me in a time that I was lost and confused and like I have no idea what this curveball is that life is throwing me, but we're going to roll with it. And through that process, there came a point when I got into coaching and went through a couple cohorts of my own client base where I realized that the mindset work that was really popular, especially around like pre-COVID, it was not working the same way that it used to work when I first got into this space. And even meditation, which can be a really powerful tool, it wasn't doing it for me the way that it had used to. And for a while, I was making that mean that I was wrong. Like I was just stuck, or I was just, you know, not showing up in the way that I needed to, or things like that. And what I actually realized over the course of leaning even more into embodiment, even more into some deeper practices like breath work, like microdosing, which I know you've been talking more about, and my own deep therapeutic journeys, I was realizing the missing piece was deep therapeutic work and allowing myself to balance those daily maintenance practices like meditation, like journaling, like even long walks, or I've been really loving like voice note processing, going for a long walk and just having a stream of consciousness voice note going.
Yeah.
Balancing those practices with the deeper work, like long, hour-long breathwork journeys, introducing plant medicines, all those kinds of things, and allowing the two to inform each other and end up creating like an upward spiral through that process. So that's the super, super high level view of the journey
Yeah.
arc.
Totally, which I love. I'm curious what, like, because I've done breath work, I've done meditation, but for people who haven't, what would you say is the biggest difference? Because you say breath or meditation wasn't quite working the same for
Mm.
you as breath work was eventually. What do you think, what would you say the difference is for you between the two?
Yeah, so breathwork allows you to access a non-ordinary state of consciousness much quicker than meditation can. So that's not to say that you can't access that through meditation, because people who are very masterful with meditation can access those states more easily than us normies, myself included, I would consider. And when I say breath work, what I'm referring to is breathing in and out. This could be in through your nose, out through your mouth, or this could be in and out through your mouth. But breathing in a really deep and full way in a conscious, connected pattern for an extended length of time. And what this breathing pattern allows for is for what's called your default mode network to quiet in your mind. And this is just, it's not one location of your brain. It's just the network that's active when you're in normal daily waking consciousness, just kind of going about your day, thinking about the order of operations, of meetings and to-dos that you have, prioritizing tasks, and also referencing yourself as separate from the world, which is an important functionality to have. However, when we talk about wanting more clarity or bliss or peace or inspiration or creativity or connection with our partners, what we're really desiring is that direct access to like capital T truth. We've all felt it before. It's that moment where you're like, oh, there I am. Or, oh, like this is what life's all about. And then through daily life, we lose that. But breathwork is a really accessible tool to have at each of our disposal, where without having to outsource our power to anything other than our own breath, we're able to create space to quiet that default mode network, that sort of daily waking mind, and access an expanded perspective, access feelings of love and peace and aliveness and inspiration and all the things.
Oh, okay. So that's what you refer to as non-ordinary states of consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I've kind of wondered what that term means when you guys speak on it, because I get that moment though when you're talking about where it's like, oh, there I am. And it's
Yeah.
like, if you know, you know, you felt it or you haven't. But once you feel it, you just realize how good, well, you actually always say this, and I notice myself coming back to it, how good it can get. So when you have like this
Yes.
thing you're reaching for where you're like, okay, I know I can feel that good. How can I bring more of that into my life? Which is really, really beautiful.
That makes me so happy, Jesse, that like you associate that mantra with me. That's honestly like, that's my win for the day. It gets to be this good.
It does. Like when I first seen you guys, you and Tay share about that, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, really? Like it just put words to this feeling that we can achieve. Because I find if you don't know how good you can feel, you don't really think you can get like you don't think you can feel better than where you're at until you feel
Mhm.
that and you're like, okay, like it makes you want to go back for more. So it definitely really resonates, which I love that you can share that in that way. I also wanted to, because you talk about breath work, and I listened to another podcast of yours where you're like, it's not just about being calm.
Mhm.
It's not just about feeling good. And I think that's the thing is we're like, oh, I feel good, so I don't need to do it. But it's so much more than that. So can you dive into that a little bit? Because I've heard you speak about it, and I just think it's an awesome way to approach it versus just doing it to feel good. Because I think there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, and it's actually such a perfect bridge from that mantra, it gets to be this good, because that phrase, I started coming back to that phrase, and I don't even remember if I heard it somewhere or if I like said it once and it stuck or if I journaled it. You know, I don't even remember where it came from, but the essence of it is that in the mindfulness community, or like, you know, like the Zen sort of style of practices, it's like it's all about down regulating. And there can also be a lot of emphasis around expanding your window of tolerance for stress. So, especially when these practices are applied to like who I lovingly refer to as the corporate mommies, you know, it's like the people who are implementing these esoteric practices for really matrix, like 3D world circumstances. The context is usually around managing stress, managing overwhelm, and increasing your capacity to be with a lot of stuff in your day and a lot of noise in your daily life. What I get even more excited about than that, as amazing as that is increasing your capacity for bliss. And when life starts to get good, where most people can have this energy of like, oh, it's good enough. Or some people are actually conditioned to almost have this psychological looking over the shoulder effect where it's like, fuck, when's the other shoe going to drop? Because what comes up must come down. You know, we have these like hypnotic phrases that we
Yeah.
hear throughout our life. And while, of course, we're cyclical beings and we live within the natural flow of life, what I've really gotten excited about in my work and with my clients is simultaneously increasing capacity for the density and the grief and the sadness and the anger and the, blah, 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 all the heavy stuff, while also increasing capacity for the love and the joy and the playfulness and the creativity and the inspiration and the aliveness and the bliss. And what that creates is such a full spectrum appreciation for life and this really magnetic and exciting essence of peace and power that I just get so jazzed about.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is so impactful because we can, like, until you actually feel those things, you don't realize how that can also be scary. Like, you get into a good
Yeah.
relationship and you're like, oh, this actually doesn't feel comfortable, especially if we're used to like baseline stuff. As soon as we get into it, it's not a comfortable space. We hang out there and we dip out. But I love what you're speaking to with that, actually, like making capacity for more. So, how have you managed? Because you mentioned it. It's easy to, once you get to a certain point, you're like, life feels good. Usually the habits can fall off when
Mm.
it's actually us consistently doing it is what's creating the good feeling. And it's the first thing we kick out the door. How have you managed staying consistent with it to that point where then you can see how it like impacts your ability to feel good?
I've honestly started to view like feeling bliss as productive and worth my time. So on those days when like life's really good, sometimes I don't go into breath work about it, but I have like kind of a somatic toolkit that I like to work with. And one of those tools is something called tapping, which maybe
Yeah.
some listeners might have heard of, like EFT. I like to work with intuitive tapping rather than kind of a systematic approach where I just tap wherever feels good. And what this is also doing is working with meridian lines through the body mind system where energy flows. So there is something happening, but also it's just such an easy way to connect back to self because you're literally connecting with your body. And to me, it is that body based experience of there I am. So for me, sometimes when let's say like I get a notification and it's a really exciting opportunity, or maybe it's a client messaging me like how one of the lessons like really landed for them. And here's this elaborate explanation of how the work has just like changed their lives or whatever the thing is. I've made it a practice to take a moment to like breathe into that experience. And I'll usually tap my heart space and notice how there can be a subtle tendency for, I'm just speaking about my personal body, but it's almost like my shoulders contract in this attempt to be humble about it and like not fully take in the goodness of that scenario because we've been conditioned to think that people who just kind of like brush it off like, oh, it's no big deal, that's the nice girl approach, right? Oh, it's
Yeah.
nothing. And I've been really actively reconditioning myself to open to those feelings and let myself have a minute with it. So there's a whole bunch more that I do in my actual like 5 to 30 minute practice, whatever I'm working with that day. But in the moment, that's something that I've trained myself to do that I've found to be really impactful.
Yeah, just a small shift. Because, yeah, like you say, the nice girl way to be like, oh, and then we don't really receive it. We just
Yeah.
kind of push off. We're like, okay, and move on. But I like that little way of actually just sitting with it and breathing it in and allowing it to feel good when it comes up. And it's just quick and easy. That's what I think I like about the way that you teach is it's not this like oh, change your life in this one simple step. It's like these small little things that change our life over days and months and like the
Mm-hmm.
consistency of it. And it's also really approachable. I found the way that you teach it versus this. I don't know. It's a grounded way. And I guess it also makes a difference in the way that it comes across from you because you very much have an embodied energy. Like it doesn't feel like things you're just saying. It comes from a place of you like you've practiced this. And I think it helps in the way that you can share, where it's applicable, it's easy for things that seem like this big lofty work we have to do to heal ourselves, and you
Yeah.
approach it in a way where you're like, it gets to be easy. And it's not, I don't know, a more grounded approach. So yeah, I love the way you share that. It's just a tangible little thing.
I appreciate that so much. Like embodiment is something that used to feel like a really just like a really lofty kind of fluffy word like, oh, what does that really mean? And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I did my breathwork training, which was 9 months in 2022. So I started it and I think it was like February and finished it later on that year. And ever since then, it's like, okay, this is a new realm of embodiment. And then I feel I kind of went through an opportunity for an up level. I say it in that language because it wasn't like a magic pill where I just like up leveled my embodiment. It's like last year there were a lot of challenges that came up for me in in my friendships, in my family life, in my relationship, and in my work life that I really actively chose to see as opportunities, as basically the doorway for like this more embodied version of myself to emerge. It's like, okay, Claire, normally if you might shut down in this case, how can you ground even more into your voice and like take up space? Or, okay, Claire, if you literally have 3 days in a row of 12-hour work days ahead of you, like how are you going to show up for yourself and pour life into yourself through that process so you don't lose yourself? It's been a journey. It doesn't just happen on accident, that's for sure.
Yeah, and actually showing up in the ways of how you want to show up. What does, I guess, because yeah, I always find we use these words, but then some people, it's like, oh, what does that actually mean? Like I used to feel that way with authenticity. I was like, okay, what does this mean? And I thought it was this really outgoing person. An embodiment. What is that? What does that actually mean to you? Like if you were to define the word.
Ooh, if I were to define the word, actually, I have to think about this. If I were to define it, I would say it is, there's a congruency element to it. It's like internally being congruent with the version of yourself you are attempting to outwardly express to the world. So we've all had the experience of like imposter syndrome, right? Where it's like, and I'm not excluded from this, I've been here, but sometimes we can go through experiences of outwardly like trying to present ourselves in a certain way, but inside we know that there's a mismatch, like there's an incongruency in the outward expression and how we want to feel inside.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if I were to create a definition of embodiment, that's what it would be. It's like the outward and the inside actually match.
Mm. So, question with that then, because sometimes how we're acting outward is how we want to, but there's like that gap between, like it feels fake.
Mm.
I guess so. Where does the definition go around with that then? Like for the imposter syndrome, if
Mm-hmm.
embodiment is the internal feeling and the external thing matching, is imposter syndrome just not we're not in alignment kind of thing? It's not congruent, or does that make
Yeah.
sense?
What I want to clarify is I don't think not being embodied is like a bad thing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't hold any judgment around that. There's certain skills or qualities that I want to lean into more that I'm not fully embodied in yet. For example, something I'm still really practicing is like standing my ground and holding a firm boundary if I genuinely feel frustrated or angry about something,
Mm-hmm.
rather than my default nature is to go into shutdown and I just cry. That's kind of like
Yeah.
how my body expresses conflict. And I would say that for the most part, I'm not like fully embodied in a congruent expression of using my voice in that way. It's like inside I can feel how I want it to come out, but outside it's like not embodied in that sense. So, and
Oh,
also this is like, I'm just like off the cuff here, girl. So feel
no,
free to ask
totally.
questions.
No, I appreciate that. Just going into, I'm like, huh, what does this look like to other people? Because yeah, I don't know. The more we think
Yeah.
that we use these words and people are just like, yeah, I know what that means. I'm like, what does this actually mean to everybody? I'm getting more into like, what is your definition of it, or how have you like changed your definition of things? So thank you for just going going into
Yeah.
it and not
No,
really.
I love it because it's just like processing out loud. So you just saw like the inside of my brain out loud.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, fun to see when we actually get asked those questions because yeah,
Yeah.
for you to show up in a way where I've like, yeah, it's embodied and you're like, huh, what does that look like to me? So
Hmm.
no, I appreciate diving into that. I'm curious, back to the breathwork thing. You've spoke on breathwork and how it tied into where we're going to go, which is stuff to do with spirit baby and things. And I wanted to kind of work our way up because if I was to hear, I think that I still struggle with the side of spirituality. I'm very spiritual, but I also err it with a side of caution. Like I have some skepticism, and then I'm like, wait, does it feel true? Does it not? And I often like, will go to that first. But because it was coming from you, it's something where I was like, oh, I love what Claire speaks about. She feels very grounded. Like I know you're not just. I don't know. I just had a trust in what you would say, but it brought me into a whole other realm where I was like, wow, this is like different than what I've heard. So I'm really intrigued to actually speak on that. But to bridge to there, breathwork you've shared goes into something so much bigger for you, which is the generational aspect. You're not just doing it for you. You're not just doing it to feel good or to feel calm, but you've spoke on doing it for how it's going to impact your relationship with children and generational. So if you can just take from that and kind of go where you feel with how you see that impacting more the generational side of you going into motherhood whenever you do, and
Yeah,
yeah, take it away.
absolutely. Yeah. So as I have dived, who knows, deeper into deep therapeutic work, what I've noticed is there's definitely layers to this work. And I'm not of the belief that everyone like has to go into the depths, like we each have our own journeys, we each have our own paths. But my personal biggest, most exciting dream in life is to be a mom. And that's something that I just know, like, and I have known for a while. And when I think about the most important thing that I could possibly be doing with my time, it's getting to know myself to the fullest. It's shining a light on all the places that I subconsciously, sneakily want to hide from myself, and letting myself be in the discomfort of the places that I don't show up to my fullest capacity, the places that I'm reactive with my partner, the places where I know I want to do something and time goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And I just like keep putting things on the back burner. It's like all those things that we don't like to admit to ourselves or to other people. I would just want to show up as the best role model and the safest, most loving place possible for my children when I do have them. And I know that the more I commit to this work for myself first, and for my partner, and for my friends, and for my clients, and just like really dedicate myself to it, that I will inevitably be the most safe, loving place for my children. But what I witness in the world is there are a lot of people who I don't even think they realize it. And maybe I create stories about certain people. I'm open to that. But it seems to me like people get married and they have children before they even fully understand who they are and their own stress responses and their own coping mechanisms and the ways that they allow emotions to get the best of them. And they don't fully acknowledge the consequences that that has for the people around them. So there's a level of responsibility that I've been leaning into with this work where it's like, damn, I respect myself that much to over and over and over and over again show up for my breathwork practice, show up for my meditations, show up for prayer, show up for tapping, whatever the thing is, getting up in the middle of my workday and like dancing for a song, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the state of the world, which a lot of people feel like pretty stressed out about right now, and I don't even think that's exclusive to right now. It seems like there's always remarks being made about the state of the world. Like I can remember ever since I was a kid, it's like the state of the world is a mess. It's like,
Yeah.
has it ever been okay? Like, are you all okay? What's happening? So that's where generational healing comes in the picture. And just really committing and devoting ourselves to whatever, like, I don't care what practice resonates with you, but like, please show up for yourself and please show up for quiet and stillness and self reflection and connecting with higher intelligence. Like, all of these things are just so lost on a really large percentage of the world. And I know that the people who I spend time with who actually do devote themselves to that work are just like the most grade A people around.
Mm-hmm. And then to see that, or just knowing the impact, I guess, it can have on the people around you. Like when we say the change we wish to see in the world,
Mm-hmm.
or be the change we wish to see in the world. Like it seems to be taken very literally when you're like, hey, one, my nervous system and how that affects things, how I respond, how I
Yeah.
feel when something goes on. So I think that's really cool when you can, it's easier to almost do things for other people versus ourselves sometimes. So as soon as you bring in the generational thing of, you're like, hey, what am I doing for my kids? Or at least I found myself, sometimes it's easier to like get up for my partner instead of get up for myself at the time I say. And the aspect of doing it for our children or the people that come after us or your nephews or nieces sometimes be an easier approach to actually do these things that will benefit us. So I love that idea of doing it, just understanding the impact that how you carry yourself in the world impacts others and that we have control over that, which I think is really cool. Something I want to dive into quickly because it was also part of the post that initially I was like, hey, I want to talk about is you've done breath work for that, but you also realize it goes into like how you're preparing the body, not just your nervous
Mm-hmm.
system. And you brought up like tracheal psyching and minerals and just caring for your body. Like I know you go to the gym and you work out and you get movement and just you're seeing it as a really holistic view of like your vessel carries this baby and your nervous
Yeah.
system is going to be this baby's nervous system, which I think is just not as common to think of in
Mm-hmm.
the people that I see online, at least. And maybe that's not exactly true, but that thing of like people want kids, but they don't really want to be like a mother of what that could look like or
Mm.
looking at what that can be for them. And I think you've just, from what I've seen, really nailed it in the idea that like your body and your mind is going to be this baby's home and how you can do that in the best way. So I don't know if you want to take it from there on anything or anything you want to share that's been exciting in that way that you have done to prepare yourself outside of just breath work
Mm.
for
Yeah.
becoming a mom.
The physical stuff, it's funny because I don't talk about that a whole lot, but it's such a big part of my life and it has been
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. And I would say that I feel really disheartened, honestly, when I hear about women who have fertility challenges. And I know through either what I know of them personally, or maybe sometimes even hear it with like influencers, like people you don't actually know in real life, but you know that
Mm-hmm.
they're dousing themselves in perfumes and you know that they're like you can see videos and like microwaving plastic Tupperware, like things that are just so, from my perspective, obviously harmful to our hormones. And I feel disheartened because I know that people genuinely just don't know that those are harmful. And what a challenge, and like a real challenge that would be to go through, like wanting to conceive a child and not being able to. And it's something that I honestly pray often for, is that this information gets to be more widely shared throughout the world. How to fuel ourselves, how to avoid synthetic fragrances and all the things, just to support our body to be at its optimal for when we actually do want to have children. But yeah, the cycle tracking has been huge too, just like understanding my body. And my friends and I always joke around. It's like, I'm ovulating, woo! Or it's like, oh, I'm in luteal, like, help a sister out, you know? So there's a playful element to it too. I like to make sure that I don't get caught up in being so aware and so serious about all the things, because realistically, there's always more you can optimize. And I like to allow myself to like make tweaks and then just kind of like let myself maintain, and then make more tweaks down the road and then maintain when it comes to the physical stuff. Because truly, there's always, like, I can think of 5 things right now that I could optimize.
Yeah, yeah, never ending. You're like, oh, fix
Mm-hmm.
this. But again, just to point out that grounded approach. I think that's why it resonates so much, is because we can take in so much information. They're like, eat this diet, do this, cut out this, do this. And it's like, there's so much noise. And just that, I take it, I try it out, I
Mm-hmm.
see how it feels, and then I do it. But the main thing that you pointed out that I'm really resonating with, because lately I've been noticing that, is I've taken it all seriously for quite some time, and it doesn't leave room for like play and just enjoyment. And realizing like, yeah, take life seriously, but it's really not that serious.
Mm-hmm.
So to know these things and to approach them and like, yeah, do things to make you feel good and think about things, but at the same time doing it and not take it all so seriously where it stresses us out.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah, really stuck out with that, because I've been noticing that lately, of going down the rabbit hole and being like, oh my God, everything's out to get us. And then feeling more stress from that than actually the things we're consuming. So just that act of like doing it, trying it out, doing it with like a little more
Mm-hmm.
play, I think is huge. And I'm sure there's other people that kind of feel that too, if they're in the space of consuming online information that can benefit them. It can kind of be a lot at times.
Yeah. And I feel very called to add this right now. Just if anyone is listening to this and has or is experiencing challenges with fertility or miscarriage, just know that what I just shared, by no means am I placing blame on you for having that experience, because it's brutal. I don't wish it upon anybody. And I have clients who I've helped navigate these experiences and also heal from the trauma that these experiences can create. And in me referencing like avoiding certain things, it's like the obvious stuff. How can we mitigate our toxic load so that we can prepare, not just like 6 months before we know we want to get pregnant, but years before we know that we want to get pregnant, to create the most optimal home for our children, essentially.
Yeah. No, something good to add, definitely, because there is the other side of it where it's like that's a whole other story of how to help someone through that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you added that in. So speaking of preparing our bodies to be a home for our babies and bringing in this next generation, the topic, the main thing that you've kind of discussed more recently, of
Yeah.
connecting with your spirit baby, which again, like I said earlier, I was like, okay, wait, what? This is like pretty far out there. But the way you spoke about it and hearing that, it just resonates like a truth inside me. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And obviously, there is so much more connection we can have to things that may not be in physical form. Um, So I guess if you want to start there, like what was the first experience with this? Obviously, you're very called to be a mother, and I don't think that's happening anytime soon,
No,
if
we've got a few years.
within the next couple years.
Yeah.
But I guess what was that first experience like? And as far as I know, it was actually through breathwork that you had this connection. Like, how was it?
So, the first experience where I connected with my spirit baby, if anyone from my audience is listening, they've totally heard this part before. So, just know there's some new stuff that I'll get into. But the first experience from a high level, I was in a breathwork journey in 2021, at the very start of 2021. So, it's been about 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in breathwork. And I've had in meditation like visions of being a mom and having my kids around me, but it's been pretty gentle leading up to that breathwork journey of 2021. Everything before that was pretty gentle, pretty just like sweet and oh, like that's nice, you know? What a
Yeah.
cute visual to have in meditation. In that initial breathwork journey in around February of 2021, I was at the end of this hour-long practice, and out of nowhere, I hear a voice that comes through that is not my own. And it's a little girl's voice. And in that moment, I'm overcome with emotion. And the voice says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And I'm like super taken aback because I can't even fully explain how I knew, but I just knew that this was not my own psyche creating this. And for context, I do have an aunt who's a psychic medium. So I grew up with some just like very basic mentorship and guidance from her around subtle senses and clairaudience, clairvoyance, um, some ghost encounters, like when I would be at her house as a young kid. So this wasn't crazy new to me, but I'd never heard a voice like that before from spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a moment of realizing I can talk back to her in my own consciousness. So I start asking her questions. I'm like, is it really you? Is this my daughter? And she's like, hee hee hee, yeah. So I asked her her name and she just giggled again. She's like, oh, mommy, it doesn't matter. You're going to call me by a nickname anyways. And we keep having this back and forth. And eventually I ask her how I can know when she's with me. Can you send me a rainbow? Because she had told me that that was our sign back and forth. And I asked if she could send me one right then. And she said, no, I can't because of the weather, because it was like super gloomy outside. And then eventually her voice came back in and told me to go look in the kitchen. And after my breathwork journey, I walked into the kitchen and there was just a fat rainbow journal just like sitting on the middle of the table right there. So that was the first encounter where I was just mind blown. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay, that was wild. Like, that is something to integrate for sure. And then from there, she kind of went quiet for a while. I didn't hear her in that same way, but she would send me the rainbows. Like, I would see rainbows all over the place. I would see rainbows in places that were like so obscure. I'd be having a bad day and I'd ask for rainbow and I'd get one in a really weird way, you know, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then flash forward to November of 2024. So this is just about 3 months ago. In the total time horizon, that would be 3.5 years after the initial breathwork journey that I just shared about.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of rainbows in between that, but not a whole lot else happening with her. Lots of stuff happening with other things. But one of my best friends, Tay, who you mentioned earlier, and she's also a co-facilitator for these immersions that we run where we do deep therapeutic work with women. And we were at the third cohort of one of these immersions that we run in Oregon in November. And I am sitting in the sauna It's the day after the girls had left. So we stayed after the girls left on the property. And I'm in the sauna, and there had been all week this one song that was just pulling at my soul. Like, I had never heard it before that week, and Tay had played it. And I snapped my head over to her. I'm like, what is that song? And she's like, oh, it's called Gentle Mercy by Holloway. I'm like, wow, that song is incredible. And then she put it on a couple minutes later because she was organizing a playlist. So she like kept going in and out of songs. And I snapped, I'm like, what is that song? She's like, Claire, it's the same song. It's Gentle Mercy by Holloway. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Okay, great song. Happened a third time. She puts the song on to like reorder the playlist. I do this. I'm like, oh my God, what's that? She's like, Claire, like, I don't know what to tell you. It's the same song. So I just kind of like surrendered to it. I'm like, okay, noted. This song means something to me. I don't have to know right now what it means, but obviously it means something because I was like obsessed with it. And then I'm having this experience in the sauna, and I'm just playing some songs while I'm in there, and I'm not doing breath work. I'm not meditating. I'm just sitting there. And then that song comes on. And out of nowhere, I start to have this semi like out of body experience where I can feel myself in my present day self sitting in the sauna, but I can also feel myself pregnant and giving birth.
Whoa.
And there was no pain. It was just like the overall sensation of like being in a pool of water and like having people around me. And it was the craziest thing. It just came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, I hear her voice again for the first time in 3.5 years. And she says, Mommy, Mommy, why don't you connect with me anymore, Mommy?
Hmm. So what a big thing to happen 3 years later, like silence and none. Have you tried to connect with her in the 3 years? Like, do you sit down and that's an intention you go into, or does it just like you trust if it comes up, it comes up, or?
In the 3.5 year break, I never would intentionally like try to talk to her. I would ask for rainbows,
Oh, okay.
and I would kind of like say hi and be like, I love you, like
Yeah.
playful. But, and this is only like the beginning of this whole story at the immersion.
Yeah.
But what I realized in that moment, it was honestly so shocking that I was like pulled out of the vision and like that kind of out of body experience. And then I realized what happened, and I was kind of frantically like trying to connect back with her, but I had just been so shocked and pulled out of it that I couldn't drop back in.
Hmm.
So I felt kind of bummed at first. I was like, damn it, I missed my chance. And I just kind of sat with it and I journaled on it, and I was like, okay, she doesn't want me to always rely on her to send me a sign. She wants me to communicate with her. So I kind of was just like reflecting on this. Little did I know, I actually found this out days later, but that same night that I had that experience in the sauna, one of my clients who had flown home by that point, and she has a young daughter who is like kind of freaky tapped in, will like say things, and she
Just
thinks
connected
she's,
little kid.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's got big blue eyes, one of those kids. And she was tucking her girl into bed, had no idea about my experience in the sauna. She knew
Hmm.
about the breathwork journey before. She knew I call my spirit baby Rhea, but her daughter didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
She's tucking her daughter into bed that same night. I'm like trying not to cry as I'm telling this story. And her daughter says, Mommy, I want to talk to Rhea. And her mom's like, excuse me? Like, what did you just say? She goes, I want to talk to Rhea. And then afterwards, she asks her, what did Rhea want to tell you? And just like so nonchalantly, matter of factly, oh, Rhea wants to talk to her mommy.
Hmm. That is, and yet to
Like,
not know, hey, you're just like, wait, what?
yeah, just like totally out of the blue.
Ha. Great, but I guess just coming through when kids are like, I don't know, just open stream of consciousness because they're kids. Like they're just so
Yeah.
much more tapped in, I guess, before a certain age. That's that's yeah, wild. Takes a minute for me to like so be like, huh, that happened. So I guess from there, like you heard that and that was probably mind blown. I'm
Yeah.
assuming like just to realize she is really trying to connect. Was there more around that experience where she did connect with you more? Have since then, since that's November, have you been going in and trying to connect with her now, other than just noticing rainbows and saying hi?
Yeah.
How's it
All of the
been?
above. All of the above. So I found out about that experience with my client and her daughter a
Yeah.
couple of days later when I was on the plane back to Austin, which is just funny in itself because I'm just on this plane full of people, like getting this text message from my client. I'm like, I can't, I can't talk about it with anybody, but I'm just in this experience of what is going on. And in between the sauna experience and finding out about that, I went into two deep therapeutic journeys alongside my friend Tay. So, in one of those experiences with breath work, I went in consciously this time. So, she had come to me without like spurring it on. And now I was ready to put that song on times three, like just in the middle of the breathwork journey. Like, let's just play that 3 times. I want to see what comes through. And I had written some questions for her ahead of time. And when that song came on, I like felt that same feeling, that just like heart opening, super connected, super tapped in feeling. And this time she didn't come through where I could hear her, but it was like visions, like she was showing me visions.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some questions for her. I was asking, it was funny. It was kind of a combined experience for anyone who isn't super like aware of what the subtle senses are and intuitive development. There's four primary ways that information can come to you from spirit. And most people have heard of clairvoyance, maybe clairaudience. Those are kind of the two most common. So clairvoyance is seeing visions, maybe seeing auras, maybe seeing literal spirits or beings in a room. Clairaudience is hearing, so hearing things come through. Clairsentience is when you feel things. Like, for example, sometimes my psychic medium aunt, she'll be like meditating on a client, and all of a sudden she'll get immense pain in her arm or like her neck. And maybe then in the session, it'll come through that the person they're wanting to connect with had like broken their arm or their neck, or, something really
Mm-hmm.
hyper specific like that. So spirit can send information through feeling, and spirit can also send information through knowing. So some people have a natural ability to be like, I don't know why exactly, but I have a gut feeling about this. Or like, I should do that or I shouldn't do that. And I don't have any logic behind it, but I just know. So
Mm-hmm.
that's claircognizance. It's like just knowing in your gut. In this breathwork journey, I started asking questions, and I asked, how can I prepare to be the best mom for you? And she said that she wants me to connect with her every day and like actually tap in and tell her I love her and say hi to her and all the things and like prepare that relationship ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I asked, does your soul have a mission to fulfill here on earth? And she said it was to help heal mother daughter relationships.
Oh wow.
And then the last thing that happened was I started getting all these visuals. So whether she sent them or they just came on, I don't know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of open to like whatever. But I started getting all these visuals, and it was as if I would have one and then it would kind of swoop to the right. It was like shoo. And then like the next vision would come and then it would swoop and it was like shoo. And it was the same scene, but it was time passing. So it started with a scene of me facilitating the immersions that we do, but I had a baby and a carrier on my chest. And then it went shoo. And then it was the same scene, but in the future. And all of a sudden I was facilitating in the space, but there was this little girl running around. And then it went shoo one more time. And I was facilitating, and she was like 16 years old facilitating alongside me. It was epic. It was so cool.
Yeah. No kidding, hey, to just get like a little tap into whatever came through just to feel how that could feel and like talk about generational doing the work generation wise, hey, like that almost I just think I'm like, oh, if that doesn't give you permission to just soak into everything you're doing now, because obviously it's going to do big things for when she is here.
Mm-hmm.
And if that, like, when that future does go forward and play out, that's big things. That's really, really cool to actually experience. And from first time hearing her versus then, like, yeah, that's just wild to actually think how it can come through in one hearing her, but then actually just being able to ask questions and kind of have the visuals as well.
Yeah. I'm honestly like, I get my whole body goes electric when I think about the story, when I tell it, when I connect with her, when I play that song. It's just this undeniable knowing of, even if some people ask, like, well, what if you don't end up having a daughter? It's like, well, even if, I still know. Like, I know that there's this girl, spirit baby, connecting with me who is a guide for me here on earth, who is helping me fulfill this mission. And I'm like super unattached to that.
Which I guess is a good way to be instead of just holding on to that so much, to have a little distance with it and yeah, let it guide you to the ways it makes. It's already brought, it sounds like so much to your life in the time, even if it just stays that way. But that's
Mm-hmm.
really, really neat. So you've been reading books in regards to this because I'm sure, have you actually met someone who's had similar experiences to be like, okay, I like can relate, or has it just been books that you've read that you've found kind of that like understanding in?
Since sharing my story more, I've met a few people who have had really profound
Yeah.
experiences. Um, some, like me, they like never had the baby. Some
Mm-hmm.
had a miscarriage and have since connected with the spirit of that baby, or even some women with abortion have connected to the spirit of that baby, and trust the timing of that spirit coming back when the timing is right. And that's where I see a lot of the healing come through, especially with miscarriage and abortion, because they're topics that nobody wants to talk about, obviously, for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But so many women, because of that, end up feeling so isolated and alone in that experience. But there are ways to connect with the spirit of these children. And if you want to have a child, to invite that spirit to come back in a different body in a different time, and to also just reassure, this is my perspective talking,
Mm-hmm.
but also to reassure that baby, like, hey, it's safe. Like, I still want you, I still love you, and we need to do it in right timing. So how can you nurture the spirit of that child along the way until you're ready again to actually have that baby in the physical?
Which I think can would bring a lot of peace for people just realizing or like being able to do that, have some
Yeah.
comfort in it instead of just like a non-discussed topic that's really just I don't know, there's so much emotion around it, but to even bring that connection in those ways to still discuss, that's neat. I haven't actually considered that, where I have gone through phases where I'm like, oh, I really want kids, but I never once until you sharing have thought like, oh, what if I actually just invited, just put it out there, opened up the connection to see if something came through. Because there
Yeah.
has been moments where I'm like, oh, I like would love to be a mother or feel just visceral things in my body, whether it's a change or something, but I've never thought to actually like open that up just to put it out there. I think that's a neat thing just for people to kind of play with and see, and if something comes, it does, or people who have gone through, say, a miscarriage
Mm-hmm.
or other things.
It's really profound. And you know, the funniest part that I forgot to mention is I'll use that song in my breathwork journeys sometimes. And like I said earlier, Rhea's symbol that she likes to send me is rainbows. And whenever I play that song for clients, not every time, but a lot of the time, completely unprompted, when we're like talking about the journey afterwards, they'll be like, oh, and I saw this rainbow in this really weird, specific way. And then I would ask what part of the journey they
Yeah.
saw it in. And it would, without fail, it was always during that one song.
Uh, like no coincidences. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Uh, no, it's such a cool experience to be able to hear, just to open up more of like what can people experience and our ability to tap into something that is not in this 3D world. I think is really cool because you even bringing up the different senses where it's like either seeing it or feeling it, or I think there's just so much of that around that if we're not really paying attention, it can go missed, even though it
Mm.
is all there. So as soon as we slow down, we can tap into it a little bit more, which is super, yeah, super cool. So most of these have actually came through doing more therapeutic breath work other than the one in the sauna.
Yeah. Breath work and plant medicine as well, which I can talk to you privately about if you want to hear. But um, yeah, the non ordinary slash expanded states of consciousness, however you want to describe it,
Mm-hmm.
getting out of that normal, waking, cognitive, rational thinking mind and opening yourself up to allow for information to come in through those subtle senses. But breath work, honestly, in itself is really profound for that. I mean, obviously, that was the first time I had that experience was just through breath work.
Yeah, which I do think there's so much truth to that. For what I've noticed for myself is the meditation gets to a certain point, but it almost still feels like heady a little bit. But the breath
Yeah.
work gets through that and takes you into your body where you can access just this, I don't know, this different openness. You're more in your body, not your head thinking about all of it, which I think is cool. Is there other, I guess, I was going to ask, is there other ways to reach that, what,
Non
what
ordinary.
non-ordinary state of
Yeah.
consciousness? But I think you mentioned that before, where it's like you can do it through meditation, just the best way you've found is through breath work, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. You can think of it like a trance like state where you are aware of more than just your thoughts, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You're aware of perhaps higher intelligence, or you feel very connected to the world around you. It's an expanded sense of perspective and perception of the world versus being really solidified in like self versus other, human, like this is me and this is the way I receive information. It can be hard to describe, but that's also kind of the very essence of it is it's non-tangible. But when you feel it, you know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like once you know it, you kind of you know what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did want to share though,
Yeah.
if anyone's interested in learning more about spirit babies in particular, the book that I was really vibing with is it's just called Spirit Babies, so it's super
Mm-hmm.
easy to find, but they've got meditations in there and different practices, different stories. It's written by someone who was a psychic medium and realized that his gift was specifically connecting with spirit babies. And there's just so many stories throughout that book. I love stories because it's kind of that undeniable factor of like, you couldn't have known that, if it wasn't for some sort of communication with spirit.
Hmm. Yeah, and being able to hear that and other things. I'm even
Mhm.
curious just because it's so fascinating to me. Like before you, I was like, I've never heard of this. Like
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. This is just a next level of being able to connect to things that are are around us or trying to have messages come through. So yeah, and yeah, you said the book is just called Spirit Babies, so people
Mhm.
can look that up. Um, I guess is it something that people have came to you about wanting breathwork journeys specifically with this, or have you had that intrigue yet from people just wanting to find ways to
It's
tap in to it?
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't had that specific intention come up, like coming into a journey, but
Hmm.
I've had it become part of a journey, like after the fact, where I'm guiding somebody and it organically just comes up. Like afterwards, they tell me I had an incredibly profound experience of connecting with my future child. Like, can we talk about this, please? Because I don't know what to do with it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess a big thing to sit with. Like, did you? I guess when something like that comes up, because I find things that have came up where it's that clairvoyance. Is that the one you said where it's just a knowing?
Claircognizance is a knowing.
Claircognizance. I find those things, as soon as you feel that, it's so easy to be like, I didn't, that's not real. Like, it just happened. It's not true. And then we can almost like stay in our little bubble with it.
Yeah.
How did I guess your friend group obviously seems very open to those things, but did you have any of that of like, okay, that wasn't real, like putting it down a little bit, or were you totally open to be like, okay, I know what this is. I'm curious. I want to share this.
Yeah, none of that in my friend group. My friend group's like so all about this stuff. So I feel really grateful to have created that sort of community. It's something that I have certain family members who I wouldn't share this with just because I have a feeling I know what the outcome will be and it's not going to be something I want to entertain. But
Hmm.
like my mom, for example, is all about it. Like she loves getting Rhea updates. So I always update her. And then at the immersion, when I had that experience, like almost immediately after, I sent my aunt this 9 minute long voice note. Well, I'm like bawling. I'm like crying. I'm
Yeah.
like, I just had the best experience ever. It was really sweet.
Yeah. No, it is nice to be able to share that because then just solidifies it. And I found, yeah, some things come through and I'm like, don't know how I know this. I'm just like not going to talk about it. And then it happens
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh man, like I wish I, I wish I would have shared that. But it's just going through it enough times till I learn I can trust what comes through. But yeah, being able to share that is so nice and have that because I feel like that's such a big thing to go on to just like sit with yourself. So for you to have the circle and the people to share that with is beautiful to express with them about it all.
Yeah.
I had, so there was some things I wanted to just kind of flow through this, talk about those things, but then there was some questions that I did want to ask just because I'm genuinely curious, like your thoughts on things, on how you show up and live life. Because the way you've shared about it, I've expressed before, but the way you share about things is just, it kind of cuts through some of the other noise that I've heard online that almost just seems like repetitive.
Mm.
Yours again just comes through where it's like, okay, you're embodying it and your life shows it. You don't even have to tell it. You just follow you and see what you do. And it emits the energy that it's like, okay, you're living that.
Thank
Um,
you.
but what, I guess, how do you define success for yourself and how has that changed over time?
Damn, good questions. How would I define success for myself? All right, let's think about this. I define success through the alignment of health, wealth, and happiness. I would say are like the big three core areas of my life that I'm always working to expand and just create, whatever the vision is. But yeah, always trying to get healthier, wealthier, and happier. That would be my bucket of success.
some good things to base it off of.
Yeah.
And for when we talked about legacy, I guess this is kind of in tie with that, but a more broader thing versus just being a mother. What legacy or impact do you want to leave behind in your community or the world?
This is a really sweet question, honestly, because it reminds me that I'm kind of living my legacy already in a way. And I say that because I know in my bones, if I died tomorrow, like I would feel honestly happy with the way my life's gone. Like I would feel really complete with the way that I've shown up, with the impact that I've had on people, with the discipline that I've had and the work that I really care about and my devotion to just like showing up for myself and the way that I love my partner and my family. Like, yeah, I kind of feel like I live my legacy every day through that lens. But to answer the question, it would be to show people. I would honestly come back to that mantra, like be the walking representation of it gets to be this good, not from a showy place of like, oh, look at me and how great life is. I always want to be mindful of not coming across that way, but honestly, to call people forward. Like, I want to call all the people around me in my circle into like, okay, what's the next level? Like, what do you want? Not from a place of I need it to be happy, but just because it feels exciting and I want to create that and I want that for myself in my life and I'm going to do it.
Mm. Which I think is so beautiful and definitely something you do because it's kind of pulled me into that. Like I was excited to record this today for that. I was like, I feel like you just embody it yourself, so it brings people to step up to that as well and like allow them to step in that. So yeah, and it made me a little emotional when you speak on that for you just saying you're actually getting to live in that right now and you're doing it because I think I don't know what else are we here for in this world other than to feel like
Really?
so good and be like, wow, I feel good and I get to show others it can feel good. And it's, yeah, so beautiful. It definitely stirred up some emotions. So I'm super happy that you get to just share in the way you do, but also get to live that in your life. And it's very much like one and the same. What you share is what you live. So it's really
Mm,
beautiful to see that and hear that.
thank you.
And then another question, and I feel like kind of just goes on to what you've talked about. They're all like kind of the same, kind of different. Um, but what does living fully mean to you?
Living fully. I want to come back to that energy of like leaving no cards. What's even the phrase? I'm like leaving no cards on the table, or I don't know. There's a phrase people say, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's just like minimizing the time that it takes to have a vision or an idea and to actually make moves towards it, to put it into action. I'd say that's like the shortest version of that. To live fully. There's an element too of being that pillar for other people to inspire their greatness and to have fun. It's like,
Hmm.
what's the point if you're not having fun through it all?
Yeah. Again, a good thing to come back to. Like, I need to remind myself that so often because I want to take it serious, and it's really not that serious. Like, there's a lot more magic and play out there than there is seriousness. But for, I guess, like my own personal thing, once you say that, and like being able to minimize the time from like what you want and actually achieving it, how do you? I think the best way to ask this, I guess, how do you, where it's like, oh, I'll give myself grace. I'm going through a lot. Now's not the time. Like, I shouldn't do it. I'm curious your perspective on, we have these desires within us and we want to achieve it. And then how often we'll get stuck in giving ourselves grace because we're not ready between actually like going for it and minimizing that gap. What is your perspective on that when we get stuck in giving ourselves grace and us actually maybe needing more time versus pushing to achieve something that we desire?
Yeah, that's a big one, actually. So there's a couple different angles on this. One, being a woman, is just like, are you in luteal? Because, like, that's a real thing. Are you just like physiologically really tired and need to slow down? Or is it the dead of winter and like we're meant to be resting and renewing? If you've got energy and life force, like great. But I think there's an element of just referencing, okay, in the seasons of the world right now, like what season is it? Okay, it's literally like January 27th. Like I don't need to be at my fullest energy necessarily, but, or I should say, and I can honor what's being asked of me by the literal earth, like by nature. And then there's also that those internal seasons as a woman, you know, if I'm in luteal, like it's okay if I sleep in a little later for the next week or so. Like I'll just give myself that grace. When I'm entering like follicular ovulation phase, I tend to push myself a little bit harder because I know my body can handle it. And because I want to, on a regular basis, meet my edge in certain ways. And for me, what it comes down to is one, taking things in seasons. So, for example, like right now, I know I'm in a hustle season right now, and I've got clients every day, and I'm like hopping on podcasts, and I'm launching a lot of things behind the scenes, and we've got a masterclass coming up next week, and I'm helping Sam with a lot of back end stuff with his business, and my friend's moving to the UK next week. So I'm like trying to organize all of these things, balancing work and life. But it feels exciting and I feel energized and I'm like fueling myself in the ways that I need to and showing up in the ways that I need to feel grounded through that. So that's one angle is like I'm in a hustle season right now. I know there's going to be a rest season on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
So giving myself grace when I can feel and like sense that winding down into the rest season and giving myself a good month to like be in that season. The other angle to take this is giving myself grace, or for the listener, giving yourself grace in certain areas while pushing yourself in others. So a lot of the times we like to think in these like black and white scenarios, like when should I give myself grace? When should I push myself? And the way that I've loved to take this is, for example, right now, since I'm in this hustle season and I am increasing my creative output, I'm on Zoom like a lot of the day, um, with people a lot of the day. I've been going really lax on my workouts. I still go to the gym. I still do my workout twice a week, my strength training. I still do my long walks, but I'm not trying to go to like RPE 10 if anyone's like a lifter, like strength trainer here. I'm not pushing myself to failure in my lifts at the gym because I'm like kind of metaphorically pushing myself to failure in other areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Like, still, yeah, giving yourself a grace in some areas, which makes it really tangible that way, where it's you're still doing it, but just not pushing yourself full force in all areas.
Yeah,
Which,
100%.
yeah, no, it definitely makes sense because I think it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm giving. Like, I did a post on this a while ago because I was like, I've been giving myself grace, and it's actually led to like inaction. I did think I took grace wrong. Like I was
Yeah.
like I gave myself too much grace where I actually wasn't doing anything because I needed more grace. And it's like, no, at some point, like it was actually keeping me stuck instead of moving forward, which then I kind of had came to once that realization, the balance of being like, hey, I can push myself in these ways. Maybe this area I can have a little more grace and figuring that out. Cause I think for a while it was like, give myself grace. I'll start in like 3 months, but
Yeah.
I'll start in 3 months on everything I said I wanted to do. Now I'm just
Yeah.
not moving at all, and I'm becoming more stuck. So yeah, no, it was a good answer for just finding the balance in that. And
Honoring
also, I
you
like the
for,
approach. What's that?
yeah, honoring you for like realizing that and getting back into action with it. And that's like part of giving yourself grace too, is realizing, oh, I gave myself too much grace. Like, you've got to give yourself grace in that realization. And there's also just when it comes to balance, this natural swinging of the pendulum. So we'll swing to one side and then we swing to the other. And then the goal with that is to swing a little less, too far every time that pendulum swings, and just ultimately land in this place of subtlety where you can almost be in this place of refinement with the pendulum swinging. Like, okay, a little bit this way, a little bit that way, rather than the visual that I'm getting is when I used to play like Mario Kart with my brothers, and I'd like overcorrect the car steering like crazy and just crash into everything.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to look at it. 'Cause, yeah, noticing like it goes so far, but to find just a little less. Because I find it's usually like, it almost makes me think of the black and white. Like we're one way this way or one way that way. There's no in between of just navigating it. So I like that visualization.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
wanted to offer a question
Yes.
because I put a poll on my stories before this
Yeah.
for people to ask anonymous questions.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And there was one that I really liked. Okay, so it goes back to the spirit babies. Is that cool if we
Okay.
circle back
No,
around?
let's go for it.
Okay. I'm just going to read the question first. So this person says, do you feel a sense of when you will get pregnant with her, and regarding spirit
Mhm.
baby? Is that something you've agreed upon, or are you waiting for the right time for you? I've started having a little connection with my little girl and want to dive deeper with her to understand the timeline.
Oh, love the
Isn't that
question.
a,
Get into
yeah,
it.
isn't that a fun one? Okay. So I don't have an intuitive sense of when I'll get pregnant with her. I have my rational sense of kind of the timeline of my life. I do feel I'm a couple years out still, solely for the reason of wanting to really establish my business and my mission and be in that season of my life right now. But what was the second part of this? Is that something you agreed upon or just waiting for the right time? Yeah, I'm just waiting for the right time for me. But for anyone listening to this, if you whether you feel connected to a spirit baby already or if you're wanting to establish a connection with them, then you can actually like drop into breathwork or meditation and start asking questions in the same way that I did in the story that I shared earlier. And just ask, like, is there a time when you would prefer to come earthside? Are there things that you want me to prepare first before getting pregnant with you, or like before you being conceived? Is there a mission your soul, like we can build these relationships with our future children. And what I see being so cool about this is that I firmly believe when I have this baby or like my babies in general, like they'll know the love that I was pouring into them through spirit. Like they'll come into this earth with such a strong sense of safety and trust in that really primal, instinctual way that only a baby can sense? So, yeah, I would say, like, if you're curious about the timeline of your baby, like, drop into some breath work, girl. Like, start asking questions. You've got, it's your connection ultimately to get to foster and nourish and get curious about.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you're getting people asking and just more curious and tapping into that for themselves, like giving them an outlet to know more and then actually ask. Was there other questions on there, or was that the biggest one you wanted to
That was the biggest
that
one.
stood
The
out?
other ones we've kind of covered, just like about the story and the timeline of things. So,
Yeah. Cool. No, I like that idea of opening it up to people to ask questions. So they use that for the other ones, just the guests, because it is helpful. Like I want to flow through with things, but also it is nice to have just some questions where lots of the ones I've asked just out of genuine curiosity and having the time to pick your brain. Because I'm like, oh, what does Claire think on this? Um, so yeah, this was cool. Now I know at the beginning before we hopped on, I was like, "Hey, can you drop us in with like a breath?" And then I went on my way, did not do
I
that. I was
totally
like,
forgot about it.
we were like a couple minutes in. I was like, "Oh, oh right, we didn't do that." So I want to cover some things, and then at the end, if you could just the breathwork queen, just leave us with like a nice finishing breath, just ground down before we leave this podcast. In this episode, but a few things because I know you have a masterclass coming up, I think on the 2nd.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm attending that because the classes and workshops that you and Tay have put on, I'm just going to hype you up for a second, but it's very genuine. I found I get more from those than many paid experiences I've had.
Mm,
And I honestly think just because the way you guys go into it, there's very much like an introduction and bringing in, but then there's the experience, and you very much almost close it off where we still feel like held instead of just being
mm,
like, yeah, that's it. Bye. Best of luck. It's very much like a beginning, middle, and end, and it feels very safe in the way that you guys have actually went through these. I think I've done one other free one you
mhm.
guys did, and then I shared it to my boyfriend, my friends when she sent out the master
Oh,
class.
I'm
I'm
so
like, people need
happy.
this. So I want to share about it, and I wanted to actually release this before that. So hopefully, people that can listen, if they're not on it and aren't attending, like hopefully they will. So share a little bit about that you have, and then any other exciting things, and then we'll kind of end out.
Yeah. Okay. So liberate the lineage, which first of all, kind of a badass name, if you ask me,
Fair.
like for a, for a
Yes.
masterclass. Um, this actually, the name for this masterclass was inspired by a ceremony that we led a private client through. And she very much had a lot of themes of ancestral healing and like being the breaker of the chains in her lineage.
Mm,
And Tay named the podcast, or not the podcast, the playlist for her journey, Liberate the Lineage. And we were like,
love it.
that'd be an epic masterclass. So that's where that came from. But the intention for this masterclass, so for context, we did that one in August that you came
Mm-hmm.
to. And that was very much around fight or flight and stress responses, coping mechanisms, and going into the non ordinary space through breath and somatics to build awareness around those and then break free from those. This masterclass is going to build off of the previous one in a way, while
Mm-hmm.
also still providing some good foundational information for the people who didn't attend the first one. And we're really diving into more of the fawn response, which, if you're listening and you're not sure what I'm talking about with the fawn response, when it comes to stress responses, you've probably heard of fight, flight, maybe freeze. Fawn is a stress response, and it's essentially people pleasing. So it's when we sacrifice our own needs to appease others. You can go through my page and read my content because I went through a whole journey with this last year. But the opposite of people pleasing is taking up space and moving into a healthy form of a fight response, which a lot of people want to embrace their femininity or activate their creativity. And they try to just jump right to that, not understanding that the doorway into your femininity, your creativity, your life force is actually your power center. So that's the vibe that we're bringing for Liberate the Lineage Masterclass. We are actually going to be guiding you through a full breathwork journey. It's going to be an hour-long breathwork journey. I know that sounds like a long time. It goes by so fast. And the thing that I love most, just like you spoke to about the master classes that we offer, which we hardly ever do, is that it's not just something you can search on Google. Like it's not something you can scroll Instagram and find. It's a felt experience of transformation and healing that you get to walk away being like, whoa, I'm different because of that. So that's the spiel
Yeah.
on that.
Which very true, because last week I was like, I feel like, because just hearing your stuff again, you're like, I do, or maybe it was on the episode where you talk about, you're like, I do regular like breath work 5-10 minutes a day. Sometimes I do 30 minutes, but then like quarterly or something, or it was however often,
Yeah.
um, you will do like a longer, more therapeutic, like hour-long journey. And I was like, I haven't done that in a while. Looking it up on YouTube, you're not going to find anything. And
No.
then it was like a day later, you guys posted that best, and I was like, yes, like my
Yes.
call is answered. I've needed this, because it is hard to find someone who, I've done other ones, and there's some where they're not necessarily bad. I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel as, I don't know, safe to go into it. There's something that's just different. That with you guys, even though it's virtual, that's another thing. Doing things virtual,
Mm-hmm.
usually you feel a little bit disconnected, or you can't get into it as much. Definitely say, like, you guys nail the playlists. That's a huge thing for me, is the music, then also the space you hold. So yeah, when that came up, I was like, yes, this is what I need, because YouTube is not doing it for anything like longer therapeutic journey wise. You can find some good short ones, but yeah, definitely came at a good time. So yeah, hopefully people attend and just get to experience what you guys are going through. I think the theme of it is awesome, because even fawn response, it's not as one I'm familiar with. I know you
Mm-hmm.
touched on it in the last one, but when you say that people pleasing, and then in order to take up space, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to look at this
Yeah.
a little bit more, because I feel like that's when I could be going into, for sure, of just like the playing small, um to stay safe, but ultimately it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to stir the pot, I don't want to make other people uncomfortable. It's just like this safe and pleasing energy. So
And that's it. Like that's the fawn response is even if you don't consciously see ways that you're like sabotaging yourself to meet others' needs, it's like, are you playing small?
mm-hmm.
Do you know that there are things you're not fully choosing in your life, but you want to, but there's been a stuckness for a while? So that's kind of the energy we're bringing to this is like being the chain breaker, breaking them chains, baby. And I'm also glad you spoke to the vibe because frankly, I don't really like do breath work with a lot of other people because I just can't find what my mentors have shared with me and what like Tay and I can provide for each other, leading each other through. Or we also just joined an advanced energetic mentorship. So I'm now going back into the longer journeys with my mentors on a like every other week basis. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, no, I'm excited for that. And then also you have Clarity Lab as well, right? Which
Yes.
is your own breathwork platform
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of house things, which is really nice, because then you're not just scrolling through YouTube. If you know the vibe that Claire gives, you're like, okay, I just have like a portal with all of it there. Are you still doing that?
Clarity Lab is still going. Clarity Lab is getting a makeover right now. So ETA probably like the next week or two actually on some new
Okay.
practices starting to get up there. And I've just been a sister has been focused on building the mission with open immersion, with the virtual kind of spin-off that we created from that open virtual, which is an 8-week program where there's 7 weeks of workshops and there's one off week. And that's honestly kind of blown my mind. Like we thought it was going to be this like introductory thing. And then it turned into these girls just like popping the fuck off. And we're like, okay, go off, sis. Like, let's go. So yeah, been focused on building all of that. And then there's some other secret things in the works as well. But Clarity Lab is she's getting back up and running ASAP Rocky here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I will have everything linked, of course, and then people who follow you will see it there. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, I will have it released before this weekend. It is the second, right? It's on a
Yeah,
Sunday.
Sunday,
Yeah.
February 2nd.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I will have this released in the next couple days so people can know about it, hear about it, be at that, because it's just such awesome work that you guys are doing. So is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we end off and you lead us out with a little a little breath to close out. Yeah, is there anything else on your heart you want to share?
I could honestly talk with you all night because I just love you, but we can wrap this up for now and maybe do a part two later on.
Yes, because I'm curious about relationship stuff. You posted some
Yeah.
things. I'm like, oh, I want to pick your brains. So maybe there is a part two where it's just other things out there. But thank you for this, Claire. This is awesome. Like I said at the beginning, this has been just full circle. Actually, being able to just putting it on my notebook 2 years ago to be like, I'm gonna have Claire on there, and then also feeling just the timing kind of aligned with things.
Yeah.
And to be here now and to be able to follow along your journey and see what you share, but then also to be in the connection, even though we're like, I don't know, hours apart and never met
I
in
know.
person, you still just feel like someone I can speak to, come to things honestly and vulnerably, and then attend and get some of your gifts through online. So thank you. And then, yeah, whenever you're ready, you can kind of just take us away with a little breath and we'll close out.
Sure. Before we do that, I just had to say it feels kind of weird that we haven't met in person because it's one of those things where I just feel like I have met you and then I remember, like, oh, wait, actually, I haven't.
No, it does feel that way. When you come to BC, that we'll get together.
So excited. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
So, whoever is listening, you can, if you're not driving or doing anything important, you can close down your eyes. Otherwise, you can just listen to my voice and allowing your shoulders, maybe just roll them out, maybe roll out your neck. We're just going to keep this brief as we close out this episode here, but you can take a deep, full, nourishing breath in through your nose, down into your belly space. And in your own timing, let that out through your mouth with a sigh. And just noticing how that feels as you allow your breath to come back to a gentle, restorative pattern. Embracing the fullness of life and tuning into anything that has been inspired within you through this conversation and knowing how good it gets to be.
Oh, wonderful. No, better late than never. I wish we did that in the beginning because just calmed. That feels so
Yeah,
nice. So thank you for all of this, Claire. And yes, we'll definitely get you back to chat about more, but I'm excited for all you're doing. And yeah, we'll end it here.
you're welcome, Jessie. Thanks for having me on. Love you, girl.